Christian, what do you think about Trump agreeing with Netanyahu
Netanyahu, leader of Israel.
to ethnically cleanse Gaza and build hotels on the beach?
Ethnically cleanse? Where do you get ethnically cleanse? What you guys got to understand is 80% of the Palestinians believe in the jihad. They've been brainwashed since they were little kids. If you any of you that aren't aware of that, you should go to Memory, MEMRRI, and look up Pioneers of Tomorrow. That was the Hamas TV kids show, kind of like a Sesame Street, Mickey Mouse type of thing. And all they do is talk about killing Jews, murdering Jews, dying in jihad, dying as a martyr, all the same ideology as ISIS. And so you got 80% of the population in Gaza is under 25. And so um, what you guys have to understand is Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2006 by force. They murdered Fatah. I mean, you can see the video. They threw these guys off of buildings. They tied them to motorcycles and drove them through the street, dragging them. They drug them behind cars. They murdered them. And they forcefully took over the Gaza Strip and killed everybody that was, from the previous government. And then they started brainwashing all their kids. And so now you got 80% of the people that believe the same ideology as ISIS. What do you do about that? You're not going to reason them out of their jihadist beliefs at this point. So what do? The people that don't ascribe to those beliefs, when Israel says, hey, we're going to bomb this area, we're going to go in here and do an operation, here's your corridor for safe evacuation, this is where you need to go, those people will go. But a lot of times what ends up happening is Hamas shoots at them when they're trying to evacuate because they don't want them to leave, because they want them to basically get killed in the bombing so they can go, oh, look, the Israelis are doing a genocide against us, when it was they were the ones preventing them from leaving. Al Qaeda did the same thing in Iraq. The Taliban did the same thing in Afghanistan. Boko Haram does the same thing. That's the problem with those jihadist groups, is they embed themselves amongst the population, and they know they'll get attacked and they know they'll get killed, but they'll take a bunch of civilians with them, and then they can just say, oh, look, this evil Western Empire is, killing our poor little people. And if you remember the Bureau and Hamas, I had a video clip of the original AP reporter who established once Hamas took over, he established their outlet in Hamas territory, or Gaza. And Hamas basically told the reporters, if you don't retract this story, we're going to kill you. And so ever since then, people that report from Gaza are either members of Hamas, or they're sympathetic to Hamas, or they're afraid of Hamas. Because if you don't report the narrative they want, they will literally kill you. And so the AP has known this for years, but they just look the other way because, again, they're leftists, they're Democrats. And so to them, it's like, hey, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, so they don't care. And so you have to assume all news that's coming out of Gaza is coming directly from the mouth of Hamas, and it's not based on reality or truth. It's all this shit about genocide, or the people are being starved, and yet, supposedly people are starving to death, but yet they're obese. That doesn't make any sense. And there's been videos, there was one, like an obese mom, oh, look, they're starving my child, but she's fat, and the child had cerebral palsy. And then they, again, Pallywood, as they call it, Palestinian Hollywood, they do this video and they say, oh, look, her child's being starved. But common sense would say, well, if the child is being starved, why is the mother so fucking fat? It's because it's not happening. It's made up. That's why. So again, like, what do you do when 80% of the population has been brainwashed to believe in the jihad? What do? You can play patty cake with those people? You're going to let them hang out with your kids, your family? You're going to trust them? It's like they have a real problem. I mean, look what Xi Jinping did with the Uyghurs. He sent them to re-education camps. The ones that he couldn't re-educate, in other words, the ones that wouldn't give up their religious beliefs, he killed them. Plain and simple. They got murdered. They tore down the mosques, they erased their cemeteries, they erased their cities, all evidence of their culture, gone. That's how they solved it. So it's like, what do you do? Again, the people that stay there are either being held at gunpoint by Hamas and forced to stay and get killed, or they're members of Hamas. You know, most of the time you see these kids dying, these are the Hamas fighters, their family getting killed. But they say, oh, they're innocent civilians. Like, no, they weren't. If they really cared about their family, they would get the fuck out of there, because Israel drops leaflets. They show maps. When they're going to destroy a building, they drop a satchel on it, calling a knock, basically. It makes a loud boom, and then basically everybody in the building knows that it's going to be hit within the next 30 minutes, so they get the fuck out. And you don't do those things if you're trying to commit a genocide. You would just carpet bomb the fuck out of it and kill every single person there, but they're not doing that. They go out of their way to save innocent life. And so the people that are getting killed are members of Hamas or Hamas supporters, or they're civilians that unfortunately were victims of Hamas because Hamas kept them there at gunpoint. And again, we've been dealing with this for fucking decades, ever since we've been fighting the jihadists, because they don't fight fair. They don't care about fairness, because they believe any civilian that they get killed dies a martyr and they go to heaven anyways. That's why Al-Qaeda in Iraq, you know, if there were a bunch of kids around U.S. troops, they would still drive their suicide vehicles right into the crowd to try to take out the Americans, and they end up killing a bunch of kids at the same time because they don't fucking care. And it was horrible what would happen. But of course, you know, most of that stuff never made it on the evening news. All you would hear is that, oh, the Americans killed a bunch of kids, when it was actually an Al-Qaeda suicide bomber that blew him up. He could have waited until the next intersection to drive his suicide vehicle, and then the kids would have been safe, but he didn't care about the children. He just murdered them all. Didn't matter. And so that's what's going on here. And unfortunately, the media, because they're so incompetent and dishonest, and they all lean left, and they don't actually do any research or verify anything, they just keep saying, oh, there's a genocide. Oh, they're ethnically cleansing. Like, no, they're not. Hamas is not going to have any part in running the Gaza Strip. Israel is going to run it afterwards. And Israel does really great mingling their society, because most people don't know that Israel is 20% Arab Muslim. You have about 3% that are Christian and Druze and other religious minorities. And everybody serves in the IDF. And so the IDF consists of Jews, it consists of Muslims, it consists of Christians, and it consists of Druze fighters who are very patriotic, and they fucking hate Hamas, and they're going after him, and they're doing what's necessary, even though the global media of the world is just pumping out Hamas propaganda as news, and the Western media just buys it hook, line, and sinker, because again, most of them don't know what the fuck's going on, and they all lean left, and they just regurgitate the stuff without verifying. And it's just, shit's been going on for decades. This is not something that's new. And so it's just simply not true that there's a genocide going on. Any genocide that's being caused is being caused by Hamas.
What about the West Bank?
Well, the West Bank is still run by Fatah, but still in their charter, they call for the destruction of Israel. They basically believe a lot of the same things that Hamas does, but they're not as extremist as Hamas is. But at the end of the day, their charter calls for the destruction of Israel and the murder of all Jews. How do you make peace with that when their kids grow up and that's what they're indoctrinated? There was no state of Palestine. It's just a bunch of Egyptian, Jordanian, and other Arabs from Arab states. Even one of the founders of Hamas, I played the video clip a few weeks ago where he said they're not from there. They're from Egypt, they're from Jordan, they're from Kuwait, they're from Saudi Arabia. They're Arabs from all over the Middle East that have settled in Palestine. There never was a Palestine. It was a non-existent state. But in 1963, Yasser Arafat, the founder of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, met with the leaders of communist Russia, and the leaders of communist Russia taught Yasser Arafat propaganda techniques, and they said, just repeat this lie that the Israelis have stolen your land and stolen your country, and after enough decades, the people that know the truth, they'll all die off. And then what the world will believe is the propaganda, and that's where we're at. That's 60, 70 fucking years ago. Most of the people who were alive back then that knew what was going on, they're dead now. And so all people know is the lie. And so Zenny says, so Israel can do no wrong? Well, when it comes to this, Israel's doing everything they can to minimize civilian casualties. And the fact that you post a stupid statement like that shows that you don't know your asshole from a hole in the ground. You're a child who is ignorant of the world and history. Yeah, you guys are kind of fucked because you gave up your guns in, what was it, 2009, I think it was, or 99? I can't remember what it was. That's what happens. They know what they're going to do decades in advance, and now everybody's been disarmed. They impose digital ID, and eventually they'll send men with guns to drag your ass to a concentration camp or to be lined up against the wall and shot or whatever they want in the future. So Christian Satsky says, what about Israel bombing Qatar, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Tunisia, and Yemen? So they didn't bomb Qatar. They bombed the members of Hamas that were billionaires because they stole all the aid from the Palestinians that they supposedly represent. And meanwhile, they're hanging out in Qatar, living like kings and queens and driving Lambos around and getting their dicks blown by hookers. And Israel dropped some bombs on them and killed them because they were hiding out there, or killed most of them. Iran, they bombed Iran because Iran was behind Hezbollah and Hamas and the 7 Day War, or the October 7th attacks. And so that was payback. Iraq, I don't know what part of Iraq you're talking about they bombed. They bombed parts of Syria because the jihadists that have basically taken over Syria were going after the Christians, and they're lighting forest fires and basically trying to burn the rest of the Christians out. It's like 15 years ago there were 3 million Christians in Syria. Now there's only about 300,000 left because they've been ethnically cleansed by the jihadists there. What about that? You don't care about the Christians that get ethnically cleansed and murdered by the jihadists? Of course not, because you probably don't know what the fuck's going on either. Tunisia, I don't know what part of Tunisia you're talking about. Yemen, well, the Houthis have been sending drones from their territory into, ever since the October 7th attacks, they've been sending drones into Israel. So you think Israel's just supposed to sit there and take it when Yemen's bombing their country? Of course not. So they bombed the fuck out of the people that were bombing them. They committed an act of war and they suffered the consequences. Just like Hamas started a war and they're getting their asses kicked. They started it. You can't start a war and then cry about it later. So Christian, so you think everybody in Israel should be killed or should be kicked out? Is that what you're for? Are you calling for a genocide against all the Israelis, including the Muslims that live there? Is that what you're advocating for?
Stolen land.
Stolen land, fucking moron. Israel has always been Israel, dude. It predates Islam, predates Christianity. The Jews have always had Israel until they were chased out throughout history, and now they're back. It's their land. And, a lot of the Arabs look at it that way as well. I played clips from a very famous Saudi guy that was talking about that. Again, most people, all they know is the propaganda. Yeah,
For
I don't know what's going to
MAGA,
happen with the UK, but the way they're going demographically, because everybody's been disarmed, at some point, the Islamists are going to take over in 20 to 30 years. And now the Islamists are going to be in charge of your state. And then they're probably going to give you three options: convert to Islam. If you don't want to convert to Islam, you can pay the jizya tax and live like a second class citizen, but you still got to follow all their Sharia laws. And if you don't like any of the first two options, then the third option is they fight you and kill you. So again, demographically, 20, 30 years, the UK is going to be, I think it's already their elementary schools in a lot of the counties. It's like over 50% of the students in elementary school are Muslim. What do you think happens in 20 years when you got majority Muslim? Right now it's only about 6.5% are Muslim in the UK. But what happens in 20, 30 years when the majority Muslim kids grow up and become adults and continue to get indoctrinated into the ISIS ideology? What do you think's going to happen? Same thing that's been going on in Syria, that went on in Iraq. It's going to happen there. And then you'll have a nuclear armed ISIS caliphate, basically right in the middle of the UK.
What do you think of Mam Dani as mayor for New York?
Well, he's a communist. He doesn't believe in police. He doesn't believe in law enforcement. He thinks everybody should just be out in the streets. Because again, he's a trust fund baby. His parents were rich. He went to, expensive schools growing up. And, it's like a lot of the elite. That's why they embrace communism, Marxism, socialism. Not because they want to live under that, but they want to rule the people using that form of government. And so he expects once the communist revolution takes over that he's going to be one of the people leading it and running it. And yet, because the Marxists that actually take power are so ruthless, he'll be one of the first people that's lined up against the wall and shot when he realizes he's not going to get to participate and help run things.
Do you have any criticisms as Donald Trump as a president?
Well, it's, he did roast Pam Bondi, which, one of those last tabs there, maybe you can pull that up and we can kind of cover that before we dip on out.
This one?
Yes, click on the image. So it says, Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially, same old story as last time. All talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey? What about Adam Shifty Schiff?
It's the fucking Twitter thing.
What about Letitia James? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. Then we almost put in a Democrat-supported U.S. attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke rhino who is never going to do his job. That's why two of the worst Democratic senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit and that we had no case. No, I fired him, and there is a great case, and many lawyers and legal pundits say Lindsay Halligan is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. President Donald J. Trump. So that is pretty much people on the right are like, hey, we've been patient. He's been there 8 months. Pam Bondi talks a lot. She goes on TV a lot about all these cases that she's working on, but yet all we hear is that Director Comey is going to be indicted in the coming days. Well, we haven't seen that yet. It hasn't happened yet. And so that would be my critique of Donald Trump is like, when it comes to these prosecutions, all these people that persecuted him illegally and committed high treason through the Russiagate hoax, nothing has happened to any of them. So until I see somebody getting indicted, I see them in their orange jumpsuits getting frog marched, I'm going to be just as disappointed as you guys are. I would have thought some of these people would have been arrested by now, but it hasn't happened. So I'm not happy about that. And people need to go to prison for what they did. Because if that happens and they're convicted, the evidence will be out there, but unfortunately the news will just say, it's doing what they're doing now. Oh, he's going after his political enemies. He's supposed to be going after people that broke the fucking law because we're supposed to be a nation of laws. And it's not happening. Mr. Mark 315, my toxic ex found a new boyfriend 2 months after I dumped her. Was she cheating? Probably. She probably was at least talking to that guy beforehand. That typically doesn't happen. Typically she's talking to those guys, maybe meeting them for drinks or going to lunch, and the guy's hitting on her, and she says, well, my boyfriend or I are having problems. I can't do anything yet. And then once she mentally decides that she's going to leave your relationship, then, it just kind of happens, He ended up inside me, and I just couldn't say no. So it looks pretty sus, Mr. Mark. I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw.